Hello everybody, welcome to Buzzing Through Time, Meliponas in Mayan Culture. My name is Tana Benitez and I'm joined by my two other co-hosts,
Caroline Casey
and Ava Gertson.
Today we're going to be talking about the Melipona bee and how, as a species, it has existed and continues to exist within Mayan culture.
We had the wonderful opportunity to visit Balamcab, a Meliponario in Tequi, Yucatan, and interview Ana Pina, the primary caretaker of Balamcab's Melipona bees. A Meliponario is the Spanish word for the habitat which the Melipona bees are kept. While visiting Ana's Meliponario, she was able to tell us about traditional beekeeping practices and the spiritual significance that she has seen from being their primary caretaker.
Balamcab is located in Tequi, Yucatan, a small, charming Yucatecan town most widely known for its guayabera industry, which is a traditional Maya clothing. While driving through Tequi, you can see at least one guayabera for every street you turn on. Our visit, however, primarily took place in Ana Pina, Balamcab's beekeeper's Meliponario. We met her in front of her house to introduce ourselves. We were shaded by many different species of trees and plants as we followed Ana up the side of her house to the back, where her Meliponario is located. We were greeted by at least 4 different types of farm animals, from chickens, roosters, hogs, and baby kittens running around the Meliponario.
Ana told us a little bit about how she learned how to work with Meliponas. She went to school to learn about Meliponiculture, and it soon became her passion. Her love for her work and her bees was clear through the stories she told us, but it was when she brought out the nest for us to take a look at her bees where we could surely see her passion for these animals. She handled her bees with care, as if they were her own children. They are in some ways. Because we visited on a rather cool day, the bees were pretty quiet, but they were hard at work, flying in and out of the nests quickly and with purpose as they searched for nectar from Ana's solard, or her large garden of trees, flowers, and plants that her bees pollinate.
As we know, bees are the primary pollinators of our planet Earth. Melipona bees, or in Mayan, xunan cab, are stingless bees located in the Yucatan Peninsula, which is the easternmost part of Mexico, separating the Gulf of Mexico from the Caribbean Sea.
As you are about to learn, Melipona bees are very different from what you would typically think of when you hear the word honeybee.
Again, my name is Tana, and I'm going to be covering the first section of our podcast, which discusses the historical Mayan connection to Melipona bees. There's been a gradual abandonment of Melipona bees as their production of honey isn't as rapid as Western European honeybees, but that doesn't mean that they aren't still used in traditional and medicinal Mayan practices. So you may be thinking, what are those traditional beekeeping practices? Well, it all starts with the Madrid Codex. The Madrid Codex is one of the oldest pre-Columbian Maya books that is considered to be the most important of its time. It's one of the 3 surviving pre-Columbian Maya codexes, and it is the longest. This specific codex covers everything from horoscopes, astronomical tables, rituals, and ceremonies that the Mayans would practice. These rituals included human sacrifice, initiation of weather patterns, hunting, warfare, weaving, smoking, medicine, and beekeeping. Out of the 112 pages of the Madrid Codex, the last 12 are dedicated to beekeeping, wax practices, and the relationship between bees and their deities. It's believed that bees are given to men by deities, thus, beekeepers are caretakers and not owners. One of these deities is the honey god, named Musen Kab. The Mayan word Kab directly translates to both honey as well as earth, or the world, which is why in Mayan culture, Melipona bees, or xunan Kab, are so commonly connected to life and are referred to as guarantors of life. As the god of honey, bees, beekeeping, and creation, beekeepers rely on Musen Kab for good honey harvests. In this codex, there are very descriptive and detailed drawings showing the practice of honey harvesting and how colonies must be divided and are kept sacred. While Musen Kab is the direct god of honey, there are many deities shown in this codex that work together as guards of the Melipona bees. When you think of honey, you typically think of something to make your tea sweeter or something to add onto your dessert, but in Mayan culture, honey is used in medicine and rituals. If you're wondering if the trick to eat a spoonful of honey when you have a sore throat comes from Mayan medicine, you're absolutely right. Now, the reason why honey is so valued, and this specific honey in particular, is because the harvesting of it is a very sacred practice, and in ancient times would only be performed by a priest or a shaman. In the Mayan ceremonies I mentioned before, honey was typically consumed to complete or assist in these rituals. Melipona honey is used in a drink called balche, which when ingested is connected to caring and harvesting of the crops, animals, and ultimately the bees. During certain ceremonies, for good luck, balche is spread on the nests of the Melipona. Harvesting of honey is now completed by people beyond just a priest or shaman, but when a beekeeper dies, it's custom to inform the bees who their next caretaker will be. Because of this lack of ownership to the bees, they are seen as an extension of family, accepting care and being knowledgeable of changes. Honey isn't just a harvest that needs to be completed or just used for rituals and ceremonies. It can also be used as a medicine. In Mayan culture, because bees produce honey, they also guarantee life because of their association to birth and death. Honey can be used to treat various diseases, which are believed to be a result of an imbalance of body temperatures. In this clip, Anna, from Balam Cobb, describes how if someone is experiencing pain in their teeth or gums from an infection, they can consume honey, and she describes a specific example of consuming honey over the course of 2 days and successfully curbing the infection because of it.
Tiene infección en el diente, porque antes no había dentistas. Cuando tiene mucha infección y está el dolor y está la inflamación de la muela, se agarran la miel, se lo ponen. Y miren, en 2 días te sale toda la tos. Eso sí, una vecina, porque mi papá siempre tenía, como ve, mi papá saca la miel y lo lleva a mi casa. Y a veces me llevaba yo pequeña, ¿no? Llevaba a mi papá, me dice, ay, vamos sacando la miel, ponemos en frasquitos, lo levanto fuera detrás de la casa.
Melipona honey had a similar importance to that of maize, or corn for the Mayan, which basically structured their culture of food, spirituality, and work. This shows just how important these bees are to the Mayan. Now, honey isn't the only important thing that these Melipona bees give to mankind. The wax, or cerumen, has been used for making candles or figurines, and Meliponiculture as a whole has shown how traditional beekeeping practices are still alive today. When the Spanish arrived in the Yucatan Peninsula in the early 16th century, Meliponiculture, or the keeping of Melipona bees, became an oppressed practice. This invasion interrupted nearly every single aspect of indigenous culture, and the Mayans were subjected to Spanish culture and religious beliefs, with theirs being almost entirely eradicated. As the Mayans underwent cultural and societal shifts, Meliponiculture faced the threat of extinction, or at least until it could be seen as an economic resource. This Spanish colonization pushed for extraction of honey from these bees, and it became popular and considered a prized possession in trading, without any thought to the religious or spiritual impact on the Mayans. With the main goal of wealth and money, indigenous communities had to participate in this economic structure, leading to the extinction of local trade at the time. But how has Meliponiculture survived today? So while we have dived into the rich history of Melipona beekeeping and how it has developed over centuries of the Mayan world, I was wondering if we could learn a little bit more about what it looks like today. Caroline, can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned from Anna and her family at Balam Cobb?
Tana, I'm so glad you asked. There is so much that can be learned about these fascinating little creatures. First, we must get into some of the facts about the xunan cob bees themselves. Then we can talk about the day-to-day practices of their owners and how they often form special relationships with their owners. With this, we will also hear from Anna, Gloria, and Manuel, and how they describe to us what it is like working with these pollinators every day. First and foremost, we must talk about the living conditions of the Melipona bee. Unlike the Apis mellifera species, which we are used to seeing living in the United States, the Melipona bees do not live in hives. Rather, they live in nests which can be found in nature in the low, hollow parts of tree trunks, or in the private backyards of their owners, formerly referred to as solares. Within these solares, like the one we were fortunate enough to see at Anna's home, the nests are kept in hollowed-out logs called jobones, and then later introduced to small boxes referred to as cajitas. The transferring of bees is a task which requires skill and knowledge about the bees. If the process is done under improper or uncareful conditions, it could pose a huge risk to the bees and may even terminate a colony. Fortunately, Anna is both skilled and highly knowledgeable about the bees and uses great care when transferring colonies. Within the nest lives a colony of thousands of bees. Among them, we will find a queen. Every colony has a queen, and she can typically be spotted by her lighter colored stripes, smaller wings, and large size in comparison to the rest. Also in the nests live select princesses, and the rest are mainly adults. When looking at a Melipona nest, we see many small holes, which Anna refers to as cantaritos. In these cantaritos is where pollen, honey, and wax are stored. It is also where the queen lays her eggs. Therefore, if you are lucky enough, you may witness a baby Melipona emerge for the first time from one of the cantaritos. Another interesting fact about the xunan cob bee is that it is very sensitive to changes in the environment. Any toxin that may be present within the bee's environment, whether from spray used to eradicate pests or agrochemicals used in monocrop farming, can take a huge toll on a population of Meliponas in any given area. Additionally, the species of vegetation surrounding the bees is key to the health and viability of a nest. Because of this, many Melipona beekeepers must be careful with what they grow on their land and aim to maintain a consistent biodiversity in their direct environment. However, due to this phenomenon of high sensitivity, we know that the presence of Meliponas in nature indicates a mature forest with good soil condition and biodiversity. We will now hear from Anna as she gives us a tour of one of her Melipona nests. Hopefully, you will be able to catch a glimpse of what it felt like to see a Melipona nest for the first time. It was both magical and inspiring, in addition to providing a palpable sense of calmness.
Miren, estos son cantaritos, en maya les dicen chu, donde depositan la miel. Esta, miren. Esto, donde van a brotar más abejitas. Aquí ponen miel y polen, ponen un huevo, una obrera cierra y en un mes ya hay una abejita como esta. A ver si puedo ver. Aquí hay hay princesas, hay una reina. La reina, por ejemplo, si llega a morir la reina, eligen a una princesa para que ocupe el lugar de la reina que estaba. Y aquí solo vuelan una vez. Cuando es princesa y vuele, la fecundan, regresa y ya no vuelve a salir. Ahí se queda. En la otra abeja no tiene la capacidad de volver a volar la reina. Es cuando enjambran, se lleva la mayor parte de la colonia. Y aquí no. Si se llegase a llenar por completo eso y ya no tengan espacio, salen a buscar un árbol adecuado, lo acondicionan, avisan, sale la princesa, la fecunda y la princesa ya no va a venir aquí, se va a la nueva casa que hay.
In addition to pointing out the different types of bees we saw in the cajita, Anna tells us that the princesses of the nest only fly one time in their lives and that the queen never leaves. This is because her wings are not equipped to fly given their size. Additionally, she tells us that until the cantaritos are full, the bees continue to leave the nest in search of appropriate trees and bring back pollen to the nest and fill up the cantaritos. The next topic I wanted to touch on involves the beautiful relationships that can be formed between Melipona bees and their owners surrounding the idea of ecofeminism. Ecofeminism is a field of study which examines the relationships between women and nature. It argues the idea that the objectification of women over centuries and the degradation of the environment over the last few decades both stem from capitalism and patriarchy. Ecofeminism has played an important role in Melipona beekeeping, for beekeeping has been one of the first economical activities that women have been able to participate in the modern Mayan world. Studies, such as Saving the Other Bees by Eve Z. Bratman, have shown a significant increase in women's empowerment and independence with the rise of their presence in Melipona beekeeping. At Balam Cab, Anna and Manuel Solar, we learned that Melipona beekeeping to them is not just a practice for men or women, but rather one for the whole family. Every member of their family has their own duties when it comes to the solar and the bees. However, women naturally have smaller hands as well as a delicate and emotional touch that many men lack, as Manuel tells us, and therefore you will oftentimes find the women spending much of the hands-on time with the bees. This way, women are able to establish emotional attachments to their bees. The idea of a family practice in Melipona beekeeping traces all the way back to the Mayan codices, which Tana talked about in greater depth earlier. We asked Gloria Zib, the liaison between Tikit and Koshmayab, a local community-based tourism cooperative, if she believes there to be a difference in the relationship that women form with their bees versus men. We will now hear from her.
Pues yo creo que depende de la visión que tengan cómo estén cuidando a sus abejitas, ¿no? O sea, por ejemplo, lo que Ana nos contó de esta señora que quería sus abejas únicamente para producir miel y comercializar. O sea, esta relación cercana, personal, pues no estaba en comparación con Ana y sus abejitas, ¿no? Que son sus niñas, son sus millones de hijas también. Entonces, yo creo que también para qué las queremos, ¿no? O sea, Ana sí vemos claramente esa relación cercana, pero con el ejemplo que ella nos dio, pues es muy diferente, ¿no? Y las condiciones de las abejas también son diferentes.
Here, Gloria tells us that while it depends on the caretaking situation, women beekeepers can form a very special relationship with their bees. She touches on Anna's relationship with her colonies and refers to the bees as Anna's millions of daughters. Manuel, Anna's husband and co-keeper of her bees, was also able to chip in with her response. He shares his first-hand experiences that he has every single day with the bees.
Al final, lo que yo quería comentarles es que creo que lo más importante que vemos actualmente con el trabajo de las abejas no es que sean actividades de hombres o de mujeres, sino más bien son actividades familiares, en donde toda la familia participa de alguna manera, y eso incluso se pueden ver en los códices.
We hear Manuel conclude by reiterating that there are no activities solely for men or for women, but rather every member of the family participates in the caretaking of the bees.
Caroline, it sounds like Melipona bees play a huge role in Maya culture, whether it be the empowerment of practicing Meliponiculture in general, or the medicinal benefits that this honey has too. I noticed that you mentioned that a lot of Melipona bees are really sensitive to their environment. This is one of the wonders of the bees, but also makes them really sensitive to climate change too, right?
Yes, so because Melipona bees are so sensitive to their surroundings, this makes them ultra-sensitive to changes in their environment. Lately, with the rise of agrobiology and genetically modified farming, it has posed a great danger to the Melipona bee as a species.
So, as we can see, the Melipona bee is quite special and really important not only for biodiversity, but for the Maya culture as a whole, because these bees are sacred within the Maya community. But when we talk about Melipona bees, it's impossible to ignore the decline in population that the species is facing. With the rise of agrobiology and modern farming practices, Melipona bees have consequently been facing a decline within their population because of the threats that these modern practices introduce to the species. For one, the deforestation and toxic pollution of the air and groundwater by pesticides has significantly impacted these bees' ability to pollinate and has altered their foraging patterns because of the impact that pesticides have on plants and has contaminated and polluted their nectar. We consulted with Melipona expert Ana Pina about the impact that pesticides have had on their bee population. This is what she had to say.
¿Cómo enfrentarte al gobierno, ¿no? Porque aquí en México el gobierno le regala a los campesinos botes de pesticidas, ¿no? Entonces, ¿cómo decirle al abuelo que no lo haga, que lo haga normalmente como se hacía antes, ¿no?
To summarize what Anna told us, she has noticed an increase in the deaths of her bees over the years because of the use of pesticides. She told us about how the Mexican government has been giving pesticides to farmers for free as an incentive to start farming with pesticides. She asks the sad but also fair question of how are you supposed to tell these farmers who are receiving these pesticides that they should go back to the way they did it before. Here she's kind of referring to the fact that the use of pesticides increases crop yield for farmers, which is something that is obviously hard to turn down for them since it is their livelihood. Another major factor of the decline of the Melipona bee population is the fact that the Mexican government has been promoting the use of apis, or European bees, that have the stingers that we're probably more familiar with, that produce honey at a higher rate than Melipona bees. In fact, according to the article, The Past, Present, and Future of Meliponiculture in Mexico by Jose Javier G. Quezada Ewam, honey bee colonies produce at least 10 times more honey and wax, and their products are in constant demand with a defined international market. So, from a purely economical standpoint, the promotion of the use of apis bees over Melipona bees seems like a financially sound decision made by the Mexican government. However, this decision is detrimental when you look at it from other perspectives. For one, this decision has led to the disinterest and abandonment of Melipona bees because it is less cost-effective. Also, according to the Quezada El1 article, by the last part of the last century, Meliponiculture was considered at the verge of extinction. The decrease of interest in Melipona bees have, obviously, led to less people wanting to practice Meliponiculture, leading to the decline of the Melipona bee population within Mexico, as people are swapping out their Melipona bees for apis bees. However, all hope is not lost. There have been conservation efforts within the Indigenous Maya communities in Mexico to save this sacred ancient species. Milpa Melipona Maya activism refers to the alliances that Meliponarios, Milperos, and Mayas have formed to resist the Mexican government's promotion of the use of genetically modified farming and pesticides. These alliances are really interesting because they were formed based on historical relationships between Milpas, Meliponas, and Mayas, all three of which have been incredibly interdependent and symbiotic throughout history. Some of these resistance efforts have been the No GMO protests, as well as the City Hall walk-ins that have been organized by Indigenous Milperos and Meliponarios to ensure that their voice is heard at least at the local level. And like Caroline mentioned before, there's an increasing participation of women in Meliponiculture, which in turn obviously increases the interest and demand of Melipona bees, which will both help the bee population and the preservation of the cultural practice of keeping them. With this comes the recognition of this important cultural practice. For example, places like Balamcab, according to Manuel, are starting to see an increase in tourists from around the world who are interested in learning about the Meliponario each year. And from experience, after seeing the passion and love that goes into caring for these bees firsthand, the importance of the Melipona species could not be clearer. As we have learned, Melipona bees play a major role in pollinating native plants and maintaining biodiversity here in Yucatan, Mexico. Meliponiculture is a deeply rooted and spiritually significant practice of the Mayan culture. By protecting it, we're preserving generations and generations of valuable knowledge. It is imperative that we protect this vulnerable species. Although we can't notice it now, life would be very different without them. We must use the conservation strategies that have been employed by Indigenous advocates in the past to continue the fight to save Melipona bees. I would also encourage anyone who has the resources to do so to go visit Balamcab and Tequit to see firsthand how special these Meliponas are, as well as the incredibly special people who care for these bees and who are playing a major role in this species' survival. I would also encourage anyone watching to research the bee products they use at home and maybe question them a little bit and consider supporting alternative beekeeping practices such as Meliponarios.
Thank you for listening to Buzzing Through Time, Meliponas and Mayan Culture.
We want to extend our gratitude to Ana Piña Canul and her husband Manuel, the owners of the Balamcab Meliponario, for opening your home to us and sharing your knowledge about these special little creatures. Also, thank you to Gloria Tzib Koyi, the Kosh Mayab representative in Tequit.
We would also like to thank our listeners for joining us today. We hope that you have learned a lot about the Melipona species, and we appreciate your time.